This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
Connor, how you doing today?
Doing well. I feel like I watched so much football this weekend that my brain is just full of spring game thoughts. I'm trying not to overreact to, but at the same time, it's tough when this is all we get this time of year.
Okay, so there's spring games, and then there are just other things that are sort of like a thing that they're doing in spring that is something like football. Can you explain to me what was going down at Ole Miss on Saturday?
It was the Pro Bowl. It was the same thing. Same thing as the Pro Bowl. If you could kind of peel it back and understand like what Lane Kiffin's objectives still are at Ole Miss, you could very easily figure out what exactly he was trying to do. Instead of having an intra-squad scrimmage wherein fans probably weren't going to really show up and it wasn't going to be that entertaining and they were going to, not necessarily even be, streamed on, like ESPN or anything like that, he decided, okay, let's try and get a win. And Lane is always just about trying to get that win. He never takes an L. That's not what he does. Let's get as many eyeballs as possible on our program for having a unique experience. We have plenty of other time for scrimmages and things like that. We've got an experienced team. I don't need to see these guys out there in a spring scrimmage. And he said, let's have these competitions. Let's have these guys still compete. Let's have Joey Chestnut come in here and eat a disgusting amount of hot dogs. Let's have tug-of-war contests with sororities. Let's have slam dunk contests. Let's have all of it. And let's just make this like the Pro Bowl. And that's what Lane did. If you liked it, you liked it. If you didn't, you didn't. I think they're okay to get out of there without an injury. But Lane was all about not taking an L, and I would look at that as probably not taking an L. All
right. Well, then who had a spring game that felt much more like an actual game?
Georgia. Guys, the Georgia spring game was really intense. Like Kirby said, we want ones-on-ones. And we're going to treat this like a real game because we have reps to be able to do this. And we feel like both of these units, like this will be the best unit that they see all year. Carson Beck is out there with a minute left in this game, having already thrown like 45 passes, trying to put together a last-minute drive. And Dom Lovett ends up making this unbelievable catch, pinning the ball to the back of a DB to be able to get a game-tying score. That felt like an actual game. I think Alabama's, too, felt like an actual game. 72,000 people there, new coaching staff, different kind of buzz for obviously this post-Nick Saban world that we're living in. But, yeah, those two programs, like it really felt like an actual game out there because of the talent on the field and the fact that they actually had the crowd to be able to support it.
Hey, did you get a look at Missouri's spring game? Have they had theirs yet? Is it, you think that's a team that can win 10 games next year?
Missouri had their spring game, I think, a month ago, which is weird. Like, really, really weird. My wife actually asked the exact same question. She's like, is Mizzou playing today or something like that? I don't know why that came up, but I was like, yeah, they're like a month ago, and it was very much under the radar. But, yeah, I think that the big question for Mizzou is, like, what's going to happen on the defensive side of the ball after LSU poaches their top two defensive coaches and Blake Baker's gone, and they've got a lot of guys that you're going to hear their name called in the NFL draft. Like half of their defense is going to get drafted this year. And I think the question is going to be, all right, what are we going to see on that side of the ball? But there's a lot of optimism that this should be not only one of the best offenses in the SEC, but one of the best offenses in all of college football, with Kirby Moore coming back as the primary play caller. For my money, the more talented of the Moores who call plays, more talented than his brother Kellen Moore. But I think that seeing Luther Burden in this offense last year made you excited for what he could do in his pre-draft season and all the pieces that they have around him. They loaded up at running back in the portal. Just a really, really fun group coming off of a New Year's Six Bowl victory, and a group that I think a lot of people might be sleeping on, or at least if they are now, they probably won't be by the time the season actually starts.
So if you watched all of them on Saturday, you must have seen the Hogs. They were on SEC Network. What stood out in the 2 hours that they played?
Besides Luke Has taking off a defensive back's head, look, that play was insane. Like I didn't see that live. I had to see that on the replay. But like, oh my gosh, we got pads popping. This is not just two-hand touch out here that we're playing. Given the injury history, I'm sure they'd like to avoid those situations with Luke in the preseason here. But I think that Arkansas fans have an understandable level of excitement for Taylon Green in the Bobby Petrino offense. I think at this point, you know what didn't work last year. You know, whether you want to pin that entirely on Dan Enos, whether you want to say some of that was KJ, you could say it's on the offensive line. There were a lot of things that contributed to the product that we saw on the field last year for that Arkansas offense. It doesn't mean it's instantly going to be like night and day with this group, but you've seen enough from the Boise State transfer to make you think that he's going to be able to rectify a lot of those mistakes. The RPO game, which you can't even really see in a spring game, like he had 2 runs that were called back that probably are going for 6 if they're able to be called like a real game. And you see the connection that he has with these receivers already. And you hear the way that he's talked about the leadership traits, all those different things. There is a fair amount of optimism, I think, that if you can at least be better in that area and more consistent, you're going to have a chance. And I say that as somebody that's an admitted KJ defender, as big of a KJ supporter as there is. But it's hard not to be optimistic about those guys so far.
When I think of Ole Miss's spring game, one of the knocks on Lane Kiffin is not being really a tough enough team. If you're going to beat Ole Miss, you kind of got to kick them in the teeth and they'll fold. Do you think that could be something to worry about if you're Ole Miss this year? Because we know they're going to have the talent.
Yeah, look, it's a fair question. I don't think last year they had the talent. I think that some of the toughness questions that have been asked in the past, I think have been justified. I would tend to look at the way that they run the football and say that's a team that, like, if they weren't tough, there's no way they'd be able to have such a high floor running the football. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt there. But, I think that you look at the talent that they brought in on the defensive side, especially in the portal, and you think to yourself, all right, if they can't figure things out now and get those pieces to work and be able to take that next step once again and compete with the Georgias of the world, when will it happen? And that's a very high bar to set, but it's a program that finished in the top 10 and had, an 11-win season for the first time in program history. We're asking these questions because they've given us reason to ask them, but it's going to be about whether or not they can get all these pieces to fit on the defensive side of the ball, and if Pete Golding can lead in one of the better defenses in the SEC, because their offense is going to be special with the weapons they return, the weapons they bring in, like a Juice Wells, like a Logan Diggs from LSU. There's a lot to like there. But, yeah, the toughness question is probably going to come up, and if they lose to Georgia or a team like that, it'll be asked again.
So I know Kentucky was supposed to play a spring game this weekend, but did they really play, or did they just have a celebration in Rupp Arena that is getting all the conversation?
Yeah, look, the reception from Mark Pope, I mean, my goodness, was second to none. I know there was some Arkansas interest on that side, obviously, but yeah, the spring game, we can't really call it that. If one, it's not really a true game, and two, it's not available to be streamed, which it wasn't. I actually watched highlights from my guys over at KSR who, had video, boots on the ground type stuff there, and was able to see, some of the comments post-game and some of the reaction to it. So that was my perspective of it. You couldn't just sit down and turn on SEC Network and watch this. But, I think there are a lot of people wondering with Kentucky, like, what does this offense look like after my doppelganger, Liam Cohen, went back to the NFL? They want to see what Bush Hamden, the new OC, looks like with Brock Vandagriff coming over from Georgia after 3 years of sitting on the bench behind great quarterbacks there. And they want to see, all right, can this defense actually bounce back after really an atypically bad year it was last year? So, yeah, it wasn't really much of a spring game showing. It's hard to gauge too much from Kentucky, but under the radar is kind of the way that Mark Stoops likes it.
Hey, did you get a chance to see Rocket Sanders at South Carolina and who's going to be their quarterback this year? How do you like South Carolina?
Yeah, so they'll be in action this upcoming weekend. Okay. So we'll get hopefully more from a better look at Rocket. I hope we can get Rocket healthy because, man, last year was just it was a bummer. It really was, and it's unfortunate that it played out the way that it did at Arkansas. I feel like he's not really being talked about that much at South Carolina because, he went from one team with a shaky offensive line to another team with what we consider to be a shaky offensive line. South Carolina hasn't run the football particularly well during the Shane Beamer era. They need to be able to do that better. They haven't had an explosive playmaker quite like Rocket Sanders when healthy, but it's going to be interesting to see kind of how they pair him being able to have a quarterback in Lenore Sellers, so everybody kind of assumes it's going to be the guy. They added Robbie Ashford from Auburn, but I think that Sellers is going to end up winning that starting job. And if they can form that 1-2 punch, there'll be a lot of people going, man, this feels a lot like what Rocket and KJ, what we thought they could be. They need to be able to get better in the trenches. You talk about the toughness question with Ole Miss. The toughness question is fair to ask with South Carolina with how much they've struggled both running the football and defending the run during the Shane Beamer era.
I know Alabama had a spring game this weekend, and I know that without even reading your piece because I was in Tuscaloosa this weekend. I saw Jalen Milroe throw out the first pitch. I thought it would have made sense if they'd have Gurmy Bernard catching it for him, but they didn't. They had an Alabama catcher catch it instead. And then on Saturday, the baseball game started 2 hours after A-Day started, and you could see, like, once you got into the third inning, the ballpark swelled up. People came over from the football game and were not there at the start of the baseball game. I don't know what happened. What happened at Alabama?
Lovely Saturday. That's a nice little Saturday in Tuscaloosa.
It was.
You don't really get a whole lot of these spring days like that, but to be able to do that, I'm sure the great people of Alabama appreciated that very much. Yeah, I think that everybody's wondering what this new offense is going to look like with Kalen DeBoer. Michael Penix Jr. and Jalen Milroe are very, very different players who so far in their careers have been asked to do very different things. And what's it going to look like with what we think will be a more pass-heavy approach on the offensive side of the ball? Jeremy Bernard, who follows Kalen DeBoer from Washington, he looked like the best player on the field in that spring game. He looks like he's going to be a go-to target for Jalen Milroe. They really haven't had a true go-to wide receiver one the last 2 years at Alabama. Can Bernard kind of be that guy with his familiarity with the system? One would think he projects really well. But, yeah, seeing Ty Simpson, a guy that a lot of people could be watching as a potential portal guy, if he's still locked into that QB2 role, he could have a significant market if he does decide to hit the portal and not wait around, post Jalen Milroe era, all that stuff. And he looked a lot better. So, yeah, I think Alabama fans are feeling optimistic about the start of the Kalen DeBoer era, the beginning of the post-Saban era, as weird as that is to be able to say.
Well, now we've got to be ready for mass chaos because you got the basketball portal open, football portal opens tomorrow, doesn't it? It's 2 weeks in the spring, right?
Yeah, it opens tomorrow. I don't know why they don't do this on a Monday. Who starts something on a Tuesday? Can we get that figured out? I mean, I had to explain to people no, actually, look at the NCAA website, April 16th on a Tuesday, they decided to open this thing. It's going to be chaos, I think. I don't think it's going to be chaos at quarterback. It's just, it hasn't been in the past. If you kind of look at the post-spring quarterback market, you like to be able to have those spring reps in there. And so I don't really think it yields to that. Who knows? Maybe we get a couple of big splashes there. But I think there's going to be a lot of movement just because you can't regulate it. The post-Tennessee NCAA ruling, all of these post-January job changes that we had that opened up a 30-day window at places like Alabama, Washington, Arizona, Michigan. There was a lot of movement there where it's a one-way street, so those guys are going to be active in the portal. I think we're going to see a ton of movement over the course of the next few days. And I think we're going to have our craziest post-spring portal yet.
So what your colleague Matt Hayes is calling it college football's doomsday. Is that going a little too far, or do you think he's about accurate there?
I never question the work of the great Matt Hayes. I never question it. He's usually got a pretty good inkling on these things. So I'll kind of wait and see how that plays out. I don't know that we're going to be saying it's doomsday, it's the end of the world, it's the end of college football as we know it, but I do think we need to brace ourselves for some crazy scenarios. A lot of established players potentially entering the portal. Not quite maybe on the level of a Jordan Addison leaving Pitt for USC a couple years ago, but I do think that we could be in for some headliner names that are making some moves, and maybe it'll make some college football fans feel like it's doomsday.
BetOnline is your #1 source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your phone. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts.